Have you ever sat alone, sipping a cup of coffee, and felt a strange kind of peace, like, for the first time, the world isn't rushing you anymore? It's a quiet moment, but not an empty one. I remember watching my father in his later years. He was once the life of the party, the man who filled the house with laughter, stories, and the aroma of home-cooked meals shared with friends. But as time passed, the house grew quieter. The gatherings became fewer. One day, I asked him, "Dad, don't you miss having people around?" He looked at me, smiled, and said, "Son, at this age, peace is company." At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant. But now, I do. There comes a point in life when the noise of the world no longer excites us the way it once did. The friendships that felt so permanent start to fade, not because we don't care, but because we've learned that not all company is true company. And slowly, we realize solitude isn't loneliness. It's wisdom. It's the quiet reward of a life well lived. But for many of us, accepting that shift isn't easy. We still hold onto the idea that socializing defines our worth. That opening our doors to visitors proves we are still relevant. But what if I told you that the real proof of a life well lived isn't how many people walk through your door, but how much peace fills your heart when no one is there? Today, let's talk about why this transition happens, why we begin to prefer solitude, and most importantly, why it's not a loss, but a gift. Because the older we get, the more we realize, sometimes, the quiet is where life speaks the loudest. Before we begin, I'd really appreciate it if you like this video. It helps me keep sharing more important lessons. If you haven't subscribed yet, I highly recommend hitting the subscribe button and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Also, if you enjoy this video, please comment 1. If you don't, comment 0 so I know how to improve. Now, let's get started. There was a time when friendships felt like the very heartbeat of our lives. We thrived on gatherings, conversations, and the warmth of company. In our younger years, socializing wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. We wanted to experience life, build connections, and create memories. But something changes with time. Not overnight, but gradually. One day, we wake up and realize that the constant flow of visitors, the endless small talk, and the obligations of maintaining friendships no longer bring us the same joy. It's not that we've stopped caring, it's that we've seen through things. We've learned that not every handshake is sincere, not every invitation is genuine, and not every friend is forever. Miss Wong, my neighbor, was once the most social woman in the community. She loved visiting friends, chatting over tea, and keeping up with everyone's lives. But one day, a casual remark she made about her daughter-in-law turned into a family misunderstanding. Suddenly, what was once harmless conversation became twisted into gossip. Her son scolded her, and her daughter-in-law grew distant. That day, Miss Wong learned an important lesson: the fewer people involved in your life, the fewer problems you'll have. Many of us have felt this shift. We once opened our doors without hesitation, but now, we pause. Not because we are cold, but because we have learned the value of peace. The older we get, the more we understand that solitude isn't about shutting people out, it's about making room for what truly matters. It's about choosing deep connections over shallow interactions. And more than anything, it's about realizing that the best company we can ever have is the one we create within ourselves. If you're still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment 1 below to let me know you're still here with me. Thank you for taking the time to watch. There's an unspoken rule in life that we come to understand with age. Every home has its own rhythm, its own dynamic, and its own unspoken boundaries. When we were younger, visiting friends and neighbors was effortless. We would drop by unannounced, knowing we were always welcome. A warm greeting at the door, laughter over coffee, and conversations that stretched into the night. But with time, things change. People change. Families grow, routines shift, and suddenly, what once felt natural begins to feel intrusive. The truth is, when we visit someone's home, we're not just stepping into their space, we're stepping into their lives, and that's something we must respect. Uncle Ma learned this lesson the hard way. In his 60s, he was thrilled to reconnect with an old high school friend who happened to live in the same neighborhood. The first visit was wonderful, good food, drinks, and endless reminiscing about the past. So, naturally, he thought he was welcome anytime. Every weekend, he would bring over a few dishes, eager for more conversations, more laughter. But over time, something shifted. His friend's wife no longer smiled at him the way she used to. The invitations became less frequent, and then, one day, his friend finally said, "Uncle Ma, my wife and kids feel like their weekends are being disturbed." That one sentence hit hard. He realized that what he thought was a cherished routine was, in fact, a disruption. His friend had been too polite to say it earlier, but the truth was there all along. His presence, however well-intended, was not as welcome as he had believed. Many of us have experienced something similar. A friend who once opened their home to us now seems distant. A family member who once invited us regularly now rarely calls. It's easy to feel hurt, even rejected. But if we look at it with wisdom, we see that it's not personal, it's just life. People's priorities shift. Their space becomes more sacred, and their need for privacy grows. And just as we value our own peace, we must respect theirs. We also have to acknowledge that not every invitation is genuine. Sometimes, people extend an invite out of politeness, not true desire. "Come visit anytime," they say. But do they really mean it? Or is it just a social courtesy? The older we get, the more we realize that words and intentions don't always align. And rather than forcing ourselves into spaces where we are merely tolerated, isn't it better to preserve our dignity and allow friendships to exist in ways that feel natural rather than obligatory? There's wisdom in knowing when to step forward and when to step back. Just as we wouldn't want our own peace disturbed, we must extend that same courtesy to others. Because at the end of the day, true friendships don't rely on constant visits. They rely on mutual understanding, respect, and knowing when to simply let things be. If you're still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment below to let me know you're still here with me. Thank you for your valuable time. There's an old saying, the fewer people involved, the fewer problems you'll have. As we grow older, this wisdom becomes clearer. We've all seen how a single misplaced word, a misunderstood comment, or an innocent remark can spiral into something much larger than we ever intended. In our younger years, we spoke freely, sharing thoughts and opinions without hesitation. But experience teaches us that not every conversation is safe, and not every listener is trustworthy. One wrong word, just one, can turn a simple gathering into a source of pain. And for what? As we age, we begin to ask ourselves, is it really worth it? Take Miss Wong, for example. She was once the heart of her social circle, always surrounded by friends, always eager for a conversation. After retiring, she enjoyed visiting neighbors, sharing stories, and chatting over tea. It was a way to pass the time, to stay connected. But one day, during an afternoon visit, the conversation turned to family matters. Someone casually asked about her daughter-in-law, and without much thought, Miss Wong made a passing remark, something small, something harmless, or so she believed. But words have a way of traveling, twisting, and growing heavier with every retelling. By the time her daughter-in-law heard about it, it had become something entirely different, a complaint, an insult, an accusation. And just like that, the warmth of family turned cold. Her son grew distant, her home became tense, and the very people she cherished the most now saw her as a troublemaker. This is what happens when words take on a life of their own. Conversations that were meant to bring comfort can turn into weapons that wound. And once something is said, it cannot be unsaid. The pain lingers, and no amount of explanations or apologies can erase it. Miss Wong learned this the hard way, and from that day forward, she made a decision. She would be more careful with her words, more selective with her company, and more protective of her peace. Many of us have experienced this in one way or another. A friendship that ended over a misunderstanding. A family bond that weakened because of something said in passing. An argument that started over words we don't even remember speaking. And in the end, we ask ourselves, was the conversation even worth it? More often than not, the answer is no. This is why so many of us, as we grow older, begin to withdraw from unnecessary conversations and visits. It's not because we don't care, it's because we care too much to invite avoidable pain into our lives. We learn that silence is often kinder than words. That peace is more valuable than being heard. And that sometimes, the best thing we can do for ourselves and those we love is to step back, stay quiet, and let life unfold without interference. Because at the end of the day, no conversation is worth sacrificing our inner peace. If you're still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment 3 below to let me know you're still here with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Life has a way of taking people down different paths, and as we get older, those paths can create an invisible distance, even between the closest of friends. When we were younger, we didn't think much about financial differences or personal circumstances. We simply enjoyed each other's company, laughing, sharing dreams, and believing that nothing could ever separate us. But time changes things. Some people find success, others face struggles. Some live comfortably, while others worry about making ends meet. And even if we don't intend to, these differences can create silent walls between us. Imagine 2 lifelong friends, John and Robert. They grew up together, worked hard, and shared countless memories. But in their later years, life took them in different directions. John had a stable retirement, a beautiful home, and the ability to travel. Robert, on the other hand, faced financial struggles, living on a fixed income, budgeting carefully just to get by. John, in his kindness, often invited Robert over, offering to pay for dinner, suggesting trips, and insisting that money didn't matter between friends. But Robert couldn't ignore the feeling in his heart, the quiet embarrassment of not being able to contribute equally, the unspoken comparison of lifestyles, the subtle discomfort of being the one who always had to be helped. It wasn't that John meant any harm, but over time, Robert withdrew, preferring solitude over a friendship that made him feel like a burden. This isn't just about money. Life circumstances in general can create distance. Some people enjoy good health, while others battle illness. Some have strong family support, while others feel forgotten. Some still live active, busy lives, while others have slowed down, preferring quiet routines. When people live in vastly different realities, it becomes harder to connect in the same way as before. Even with the best intentions, disparities can create an emotional gap. It's not always about envy or resentment. It's about comfort. It's about avoiding situations that make us feel out of place. When someone invites us into a world that doesn't match our own, we might smile, we might try to enjoy it, but deep down, we know we don't belong in that space. And instead of feeling uplifted, we leave feeling a little smaller, a little more distant. This is why, as we age, many of us choose to keep to ourselves. Not because we dislike people, but because we would rather live peacefully within our own means, our own realities, without the constant comparison, without feeling like we must fit into someone else's world. It's not a loss, it's a choice. A choice to protect our dignity, our self-respect, and our inner peace. Because at the end of the day, true friendship isn't about wealth or status. It's about understanding and allowing space for life's differences, even if that space means growing apart. There was a time when socializing felt effortless, when we could hop from one gathering to another, stay up late talking, and wake up the next morning ready to do it all over again. But as we age, something shifts. The idea of hosting guests, keeping up with conversations, and engaging in long social visits no longer feels as exciting. It feels exhausting. Not just physically, but emotionally. What once felt like a source of joy can start to feel like an obligation, one that drains us more than it fills us. And the truth is, it's not because we don't care about people anymore. It's because our energy is different, our priorities have changed, and more than anything, we have come to value our peace. Think about the last time you had visitors over. The planning, the cleaning, the cooking, what was once second nature now feels like a chore. The simple act of entertaining guests requires energy we no longer have in abundance. And then there's the mental effort. Keeping up with conversation, listening, responding, being present. It can feel like running a marathon for the mind. And sometimes, by the time our guests leave, we don't feel uplifted, we feel drained. Miss Evelyn, a woman I know in her 70s, used to love hosting dinner parties. Her home was always filled with guests, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. But as the years passed, she found herself dreading these gatherings. The preparation, the noise, the expectation to always be on, it became too much. She started making excuses, avoiding invitations, and choosing to spend her evenings in quiet solitude instead. One day, when asked why she no longer hosted, she simply said, "I just don't have it in me anymore." And that was the truth. It wasn't that she had stopped caring about her friends. It was that she had started caring more about her own well-being. Social exhaustion isn't just about the physical effort, it's about emotional energy, too. As we age, we become more selective about the kind of conversations we want to have. Small talk feels tedious, gossip feels pointless, and long-winded discussions about things that don't truly matter feel like wasted time. We crave depth, sincerity, and calmness, and if a social interaction doesn't provide that, it feels more like work than enjoyment. This is why, as the years go by, many of us withdraw from unnecessary social obligations. Not out of rudeness, not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. We have learned that peace isn't found in a crowded room. It's found in the quiet moments, in solitude, in the freedom to spend our time exactly as we choose. And at this stage in life, that is not just a preference, it's a necessity. There is a deep and undeniable beauty in solitude, though it takes time to recognize it. When we were younger, we feared being alone. We measured our worth by the number of friends we had, the invitations we received, the conversations we shared. Silence felt like emptiness, and being alone felt like being forgotten. But as we grow older, something profound happens. We begin to realize that solitude is not loneliness. It is freedom. It is a choice. It is, perhaps, one of the greatest gifts of aging. I remember an elderly man named Mr. Carter, who lived down the street from me. He used to be the most social person in the neighborhood, always waving at passers-by, always eager to strike up a conversation. But in his later years, he became quieter. I once asked him if he ever felt lonely. He smiled and said, "Son, there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. When you're young, you think you need the world to keep you company. But when you've lived long enough, you realize the best company is your own." That stuck with me. Because he was right. Solitude is not an absence of life, it is an appreciation of it. It is sitting in the warmth of the morning sun, drinking a cup of tea, and letting the day unfold without rush. It is tending to a garden, watching the flowers bloom, knowing that their beauty is for no one's eyes but your own. It is reading a book, not to impress anyone with what you know, but simply to get lost in the words. It is taking a slow walk, listening to the birds, and realizing that the world speaks to you in ways you never noticed before. There is strength in choosing to be alone, not because we have no other choice, but because we have finally learned that we don't need to chase after company to feel complete. When we embrace solitude, we stop seeking validation from others. We stop measuring our happiness by how often our phone rings or how many people visit us. We no longer need to explain ourselves, impress anyone, or fill the silence with unnecessary words. We simply exist, in our own space, in our own rhythm, at peace with ourselves. Some might say that solitude means withdrawal, but they are wrong. True solitude is an embrace. It is an act of self-love. It is learning to be content in your own presence, knowing that you have lived a life full of stories, memories, and experiences that no one can take away from you. The older we get, the more we understand that the world will keep moving, people will come and go, but the one person who will always remain with us is ourselves. And that, in itself, is enough. Life is not about complete isolation or endless socializing. It's about finding the right balance. As we grow older, we realize that while solitude brings peace, human connection still holds meaning. The challenge is knowing how to engage in a way that nourishes us, rather than drains us. We no longer need to force ourselves into uncomfortable social situations or entertain every visitor who knocks on our door. Instead, we learn to be intentional about our interactions, choosing when, where, and how we connect with others. It's about quality, not quantity. It's about maintaining relationships that uplift us, while gracefully stepping away from those that bring unnecessary stress. Take Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, an elderly couple in their late 70s. They used to be highly social, always hosting dinner parties and attending community gatherings. But as they aged, the energy required for constant socializing became overwhelming. Instead of cutting off all contact, they adjusted. They stopped hosting large gatherings and instead met close friends at a local cafe, where there was no pressure to cook or clean. They kept conversations light and pleasant, avoiding topics that led to stress or arguments. They also became more mindful of how often they interacted with others, choosing to reach out when they genuinely wanted to, rather than out of obligation. This shift allowed them to maintain their social life without feeling burdened by it. Finding balance means redefining what socializing looks like. It doesn't always have to be in-person visits. It can be a phone call to a friend while sitting in the comfort of your home. It can be exchanging letters or messages, keeping connections alive in a way that feels manageable. Sometimes, it's as simple as sitting on a park bench and sharing a few words with a stranger, enjoying a brief but meaningful exchange without the weight of long-term commitments. The key is to listen to yourself. Ask, does this interaction bring me joy, or does it feel like an obligation? Do I leave feeling energized, or do I feel drained? These questions help us shape a social life that feels natural and fulfilling, rather than forced and exhausting. And let's not forget, solitude and socializing are not enemies. They can coexist beautifully. We can enjoy the quiet moments with ourselves and still cherish the company of those who truly matter. The difference is, in our later years, we have earned the right to choose. We are no longer bound by the pressures of society to entertain, host, or prove anything. We engage when it feels right, we step back when we need to, and in doing so, we find a rhythm that keeps our hearts both peaceful and connected. Because life, in its wisdom, has taught us that the best relationships are not the ones that demand the most from us, but the ones that simply feel right. As we stand at this stage of life, we realize something profound. Peace is not found in the noise of endless socializing, nor in the exhaustion of maintaining relationships out of obligation. Peace is found in knowing ourselves, in choosing how we spend our time, and in understanding that solitude is not a sign of loneliness, but of wisdom. We have spent decades caring for others, giving our energy to friends, family, and the world around us. But now, we must ask, what do we truly need? Do we need to fill our days with visits, conversations, and obligations? Or do we need to embrace the quiet moments that allow us to simply be? The world will keep moving. People will come and go. Invitations will become fewer, and the social circles we once belonged to may change or disappear. But instead of seeing this as a loss, what if we saw it as freedom? Freedom to spend time the way we want. Freedom to focus on what brings us joy, rather than what is expected of us. Freedom to wake up each morning without the weight of obligation, without the need to explain or justify our choices. There is a quiet beauty in learning to enjoy our own company. Imagine sitting in a comfortable chair by the window, a warm cup of tea in your hands, watching the world outside move at its own pace. No pressure. No expectations. Just peace. That is not loneliness, that is contentment. That is the kind of life we have earned. And yet, this does not mean shutting people out completely. It simply means choosing wisely. Keeping only those who bring warmth into our lives, those whose presence feels like comfort rather than obligation. It means understanding that the best relationships are not measured by frequency, but by sincerity. So today, I encourage you, let go of the guilt. Let go of the feeling that you need to entertain, to visit, to socialize just to prove you are still part of something. You are already whole. You have lived, you have loved, and now, you have the right to choose how you wish to spend your time. Some will understand this shift, and some won't, and that's okay. Because at the end of the day, this is your life, and it is too precious to waste on anything that does not bring you peace. Embrace the quiet. Embrace the simplicity. Embrace the beauty of living on your own terms. Because when you do, you will find something more valuable than endless conversations and crowded rooms. You will find yourself. And that, more than anything, is what truly matters. Thank you for following us till the end. Don't forget to show some love by clicking the like button and subscribe. This supports the channel and allows me to continue creating content for you. Leave your thoughts or comments below. Feel free to express yourself and stay positive. See you next time.